Hi everyone, and welcome to tonight's event, where we'll be looking at challenging Black stereotypes in the mainstream media. My name is Andrea Stewart, and I'm the Senior Comms Manager here at Croydon Health Services, and I'm hosting on behalf of our Race Equality Network here at the Trust. We'll be looking at how Black people are and have historically been portrayed in the media. And tonight our speakers are going to discuss the changes that they've seen during their time working in the media, and whether their own presence and that of their fellow colleagues, Black colleagues, has really made a difference to what's being produced, and also the wider consumption of the Black experience by people across the nation. I hope you enjoy what will be a great discussion. So just had Andrew from the Croydon BME Forum and Shub Banerjee, who's our Medical Director at the Trust as well. So now we'll move on to our speakers. So tonight joining us, we've got Shingi Mararike, who is a Sky News correspondent, and he covers a range of international news stories, and was previously a journalist for the Sunday Times, where his stories focused on social affairs and race. So I'll hand the floor over to Shingi. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everyone, for listening in, and thanks to yourself for extending the invitation. So yeah, that's right. I work for Sky News as a correspondent. So my job often involves waking up in the morning, being told that you're going to X location, and then that location changing 3 or 4 times over the course of the day. But it also means you get to track the day's events, whether it might be doing live reporting or packaging. And I started my career, or I'll take it back to, I suppose, the beginning, if you like. So I grew up in a single parent home in Newham in East London. My mum is my rock and still is. Every time I do anything on telly, she texts, "Why was your tie wonky? Why was your grammar off? How could that have been improved?" She definitely is sort of the bedrock of my household and a lot of my career. Her and my grandma basically essentially raised me. I have one other younger brother, and we were in a household where education and media was important, but I didn't have the contacts that, you know, lots of other people had, which is obviously a crossover between race and class as well. But I didn't know, you know, newspaper editors. I didn't even know how to get into the industry. I just knew that every evening on a weekday, my mum would bring home the Evening Standard, which was free, and the Metro, and I would just pore over it, read over it, and try and kind of go, oh, this is quite cool. I quite like the way that they've put this here on that page. I quite like the layout, the way they've arranged it. And I kind of built up my own media literacy at home, if you like. And I kind of realized that I wanted to be a journalist, but I didn't have the contacts or the connections. But I had a very industrious uncle who said to me, look, you should set up your own tennis blog. At the time, I was obsessed with tennis. I coached it a bit and I just watched it. I was a bit of I loved it. So I had a blog. That was it. It was terrible. It had about 3 viewers. My mum made up 2 of those 3 viewers often. Don't ask how, she just did. But at that point, I realized that that was what I wanted to do with my life. And I went to a state school where they offered the chance to go on a course where you would basically go and meet journalists and do masterclasses. So someone from The Sun would come in, from The Times, from Reuters, and they would teach you about their forms of journalism. You'd meet them and you'd learn. And that was the first time I realized sort of the skills and the building blocks you needed to become a journalist, if you like. I kept in contact with the woman who ran that scheme. And then I was asked to kind of join the scheme as News UK, I think in about 2017, or if not a bit before then. I was in 6th form, still brace-faced with very short hair. I was asked to join this diversity program called the News Academy, which is still there, as part of that program. And I spoke there, and it gave me, basically I spoke at the launch event in front of all the executives, so the editors of The Sun, The Times, and the Sunday Times in one room, as well as a lot of their deputies. And that was the first time I had a chance to sit there and also stand in front of media executives, the kind of opportunities that I guess, you know, someone who maybe grew up in, I don't know, somewhere far more affluent than me would have potentially had before, would have understood. But that was sort of me being thrust in front of these people. A guy from the Sunday Times comes up to me as like, that was a great speech. I just thought I made a lot of jokes to a room of people who are wine drunk, and that was it. But that was the cultural capital I needed to sort of break in, if you like. And my naivety and my lack of being in newsrooms before, my lack of understanding of these people just helped, because I was like, oh, so can you get me an internship? I quite like the idea of working for the Sunday Times. How do I get in there? And I kind of built up my own my own work experience program, if you like. So between the ages of 17 and 21, before I went to university, I was constantly at the Sunday Times pitching ideas. And I think a lot of my ideas were based on my experiences. I was still living in Newham, and the first scoop I had was about kids taking acid to school in Lucozade bottles, something my brother told me. And it is obviously, it's horrendous, but he told me that this is happening in a school in this area of East London, and, you know, take it to the newsroom. And I get in there and I tell all these, you know, these middle class executives what's happening, and there's that shock horror. They're like, what are you on about? That can't be real. And then I spend the week reporting on it, meeting some of these children and asking them why they were doing that. And that sort of turned into a campaign, which the Sunday Times called Acid Attack Britain. And I was kind of on my way. And that's when I realized that my experiences, not just connected to race, but also connected to class, were different. Those were things that I could use as my calling card as a reporter if I needed to. So by the time I had done that, I built up a bit of a reputation at the paper, and I asked for a job to be the first ever apprentice at the Times. And then after that, I became a reporter. So that was my way in. And I'd say that a lot of the time, to bring it back to why we're here, which is talking about race and racism, a lot of the time, my experiences were, you're the apprentice who we see great things for, you're fine. And if anything, my experiences were more around this erasure of experience. No one wanted to address the fact that I was also Black and where I was from. It never really came up. And that suited me, because you want to become a good reporter on all, you know, in every way. You don't just want to be the race and diversity reporter. But it did mean when certain things happened in the newsroom and, you know, across the newsrooms at News UK, you just go, you know, it might be the presentation of Raheem Sterling and some of those Black football players were constantly, you know, constantly got at in tabloids. It might have been other things in our own paper, but you just feel like, well, I'm the apprentice. How can I stand up? How can I say anything? I don't really have a voice. And all of that changed from an erasure to a scramble around the Black Lives Matter movement. So that would have been like two years ago now, that summer in which we had the protest here off the back of the death of George Floyd. And suddenly they're looking around their newsroom. Bear in mind, I'm the only one. No one else, no other reporter. I think maybe one or two other people, one of whom was sort of like a porter. One was, I don't even know where they were, but they weren't doing news. I was doing news. I'd been a reporter for 2 years, so still pretty junior. But everyone's like, well, we don't like having you to do race, but what are we going to do? Because it just came like a wave, which they didn't understand, because I guess they didn't understand the groundswell we're feeling around institutional racism, which is a massive issue, cross-generational. A lot of my friends had felt things that had stopped and searched. There had been, you know, their experiences that me and my friends have from people being pinned down by the police on the day that they've graduated, on the day they've driven around their first car and they haven't had their insurance gone through, all of those things. I obviously know about them. I don't feel like I can bring them to the newsroom, but suddenly I'm being asked. And I remember that week, it's the week of the first protest, I went and did a page lead. They were like, okay, what about your experiences? We hate to have to do this to you, but what about your experiences? So then I write a comment piece. I remember it because I spoke about one incident where I went to buy spinach in Asda for my grandma, and the security guard taps me on the shoulder and goes, "You got stuff in there." It was spinach, but he, like, you know, it's just a little experience like that. That was the way into the piece. Then I spoke about my friends' experiences as well, and they were all, again, shock, horror, like, how could this happen? You know, you're the palatable Black guy. How can that be? And then it just became a couple of weeks of me being basically writing chunks of the newspaper. I'd be doing the page lead on the protest, then to be a personal piece, and it became a bit tiring because it goes from like, we don't necessarily want you to have to talk about race, and I was fine with that, to like, oh, okay, so you have all of these experiences, loads of other people do, but you're the one who has to talk. And it became a bit of a strange thing. As I say, it went from erasure to immersion, if you like. Suddenly I'm having to talk and talk. And that is interestingly how I got this job I have now, or part of it, because I had thought about moving over to broadcast. I'd met people at Sky, but not anyone really senior, but they read my stuff. At the same time, the media is having its broader reckoning with the fact that there's only one of one in each newsroom, and we need to be able to cover this more effectively. And, you know, I'd also like to think it was off the merit of my own journalism, but that's how I kind of moved across. It was part of that. They read some of the stuff, and then I kind of met people here, then did a lengthy interview process. But that sort of, it became at that point, I think I realized that I'm the only one, and the Black experience is not a monolith. We're not all the same person. So I can't speak for everyone, but I'm definitely being asked to. And it just felt times awkward, at times tenuous. and difficult. And then another thing you realize is that you are the only one. And here at Sky, there are a few, there are a few other ethnic minority correspondents, but we're not in the on-air roles. I mean, on the off-screen roles, even in production or running it, there's never been a black newspaper editor, for example. So I'm here, a cog in the system, but management is still largely white, which means when certain stories happen or certain things happen, let's take the Chris Cabba case and talking about it kind of just as a story, which had a groundswell of support and people protesting. You are caught, and this is not just our newsroom, loads of newsrooms are caught unaware of the fact that loads of people, unaware by the fact that loads of people are protesting. And then you just feel like you're the one running at the story, and I want to run at the story, but you're like, the hamster wheel's going one way, you jump on it and then you do it. And it's often, that's my experience. It's like, okay, you're the only one here. You need to try and turn the oil tanker. You're not in a management position, but you still need to. And then that sort of, I love my job and I love my career, but you do often have those days and times when you second guess yourself. You feel like, is it my chance to speak up? It's like doing a job, but doing a job where you come in and you're like, which part of myself do I bring to work or to the news cycle? Don't want to stick my hand up and do all the black stories all the time. It's just the second guessing yourself, which is a bit of mental stress. It's not as bad as some of the experiences you probably hear from more senior colleagues to myself, but it's still a bit of an issue. And it's like, if you had more people in management positions, you had more people who had made their way through the pipeline, then I don't think I'd be having that sort of mental jostle with myself. And then the other element of my job where race comes into place, definitely the kind of messages I would get, I got them at the times and I get them still now. It's people, I remember one time I wrote about the racism footballers might face when they went to play in Russia, which wasn't that controversial an opinion, but it was in the Sunday Times magazine. I got like a massive load of one envelope full of like annotations of like African dictators and I remember being sent a picture of Mugabe and a few like racist effigies, and the person just basically being like, you people are wrong-uns, you black this, all the words under the sun. And it came to me in the post. I managed to pass all the screening checks, and I just opened it on my desk. At the time I was young and I was like, oh, this must be a mark of the fact that my writing annoyed this person. But all those little things, and then below the line in comments, and certain times when you're on air and someone messages you on Twitter or emails you and says things about the way you look and the way you sound, it all kind of mounts up. And I think that's just something that comes with this job, but it's something that I don't think a white colleague with a anglicized name would have. So that's my experiences. I think it's the me being the only one and me wondering what to do with that fact, and then it's the abuse from time to time. I would say those are my experiences. But I do think I want to end on a slightly more positive note and say that the fact of me being here and the barriers I've jumped and the schemes I've done to jump over those barriers show that there are ways of making this an industry for people like me, and I'm pleased about that. But I've got to do the work to kind of help other people too. And I'm trying to. I'm not the top man. Maybe one day I could be, but it's now meeting people, going to schools, trying to drag other people through too. So it's like that's now the second job now that I've sort of started making my move, if you like. Sorry for that being lengthy, but I think I've covered all bases.
Great, thanks, Shingi. That's really interesting. I definitely was feeling you on the Evening Standard comment that you made. My dad used to bring that home every day, and I remember reading that kind of religiously every night. I thought it was really interesting what you said about having to adapt to fit in and bringing which part of yourself do you bring to work every day. I think a lot of us probably feel that, again, having to, navigate certain situations in the workplace. It's, it's something that a lot of us feel. And also about you kind of becoming catch of the day. When the BLM movement came about, stories, our stories weren't told so much before that, but I know that again, once when that did happen, we kind of became the thing to look out for, the big news. So yeah, thanks for your talk. That was really interesting.
Talking about the moon.
You've just gone on to silent.
Yeah.
You're muted, Andrea.
Oh, I'm mute, Andrea.
Oh, sorry, did I go on mute? I hope you heard some of that, hopefully. Yeah, so we're going to move on to Trevor Phillips now, who might have to rush off just because of all of the news that's happening today, but hopefully we'll get through his talk and he can stay for some of the Q&A. So just a quick intro to Trevor. A lot of you might remember him from production of programmes in the 1980s, such as Black and Black and Devil's Advocate, and his landmark 4-part TV series Windrush, which was produced in 1998, won the Royal Television Society's Award for Best Documentary Series. He's a pioneer in the Black broadcasting and journalism world, and he's currently a senior presenter on Sky News. So thanks, Trevor, over to you.
Not keeping all these things.
You're on mute, sir.
You're on mute, Trevor.
Yeah, not quite sure why I think I went on mute automatically. I think there are a lot of people who'd like to have that mute button with me, generally speaking, mostly people related to me. Look, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure and also a privilege to be able to participate in the discussion. And I really appreciated some of what Shingy had to say. And for someone like me, I think it's always a reward to listen.
You want me to do your kebab, or are you having sandwich or what?
Oh,
Sorry?
gosh.
Okay, that's for somebody else. That's somebody else who wants their dinner, I think. It's always a privilege to listen to somebody else's experience, especially an experience that I guess I don't have, and I'm never likely to have. As I think has been pointed out subtly, I'm from an older generation, or to put it absolutely crudely, I'm older than both Shingy and Claire put together, and possibly you too, Andrew, if we add you in. So I've been at this quite a long time. I'm here partly, I was thinking today, because of two Leelas. One is Leela Hassan, who kindly asked me to participate, and who has been a fighter on this front in all sorts of ways for as long as I have known her. And I think we've known each other, what, 40 years, Leela? And who's seen, I think, an enormous change from where we were to where we are. That doesn't mean that where we are is the right place. But it's worth saying that when I started in television, I was a really unusual beast, as were the people that I started on a program which was aimed at ethnic minorities in London. And there were 5 of us who were on screen, one of whom was white, the others were Black and Asian, and we were pretty unusual. Our mentor, or my mentor, I should say, was then and is still Sir Trevor MacDonald, who was possibly the only, if you like, well-known blackface on factual television at the time. There were others who'd been in acting and in comedy, but hardly anybody else besides Trevor had been in journalism. And it's extraordinary for me, and really, if I hope you won't mind me saying this, incredibly uplifting to walk into Sky and to see Shingy at his desk, and to see him there as, frankly, just another significant reporter rather than the intern they brought in just to make the thing look better. And I'm incredibly proud of his presence and actually what he does at Sky, which I think he downplayed it a bit, to be honest, but I think he's regarded as a very significant asset to the channel. We're having this session because it's Black History Month. And I just want to say a few words about Black history. The great Oxford historian, A.J.P. Taylor, said a very important thing in my mind about history. He said there's a difference between the past and history. The past is what actually happened. History is what we tell ourselves happened. And the reason that difference is important is because, you know, there are facts and there are events, but we can't remember all of it, and some of it gets buried and some of it gets lost in time. But more importantly, when we open the books, when we watch the TV documentaries, when the news tells us this is what happened in the past, it's never neutral. It's never a kind of impartial account. It is always constructed from the understanding of the journalist or the storyteller. And almost all journalists, I include myself here, and storytellers always have a spin. We always have an agenda. We always have a way of looking at things. So Black history is incredibly important because it's not just a set of facts. The way we talk about history tells us how we should think about the past. What sort of person was important? And why were some things successful and other things not successful? And if we understand that in history, what we tend to do is apply those lessons in the present time. And to give you a very concrete personal example, the most significant book of history I think that I read before I was in my 30s was a book called The Black Jacobins, written by C.L.R. James. And it is an account of the revolution in Haiti towards the end of the 18th century. It is the only successful slave revolution in the West, led by Toussaint Louverture. Now, why does that matter? Well, because it wasn't a sort of an episode that nobody knew about. The French had written about it. It was part of French history and so on. But what C.L.R. James did was something that nobody else had ever done. That story had always, the story of the Haitian Revolution and the establishment of Haiti had always been told as, in a way, a story of French history. Why Napoleon felt he'd got defeated and why he then sent soldiers and so on and so forth. C.L.R. James, Trinidadian intellectual and academic, for the first time put a Black person at the center of the story. Toussaint Louverture was, I won't say the hero of that story because that's not the way it worked out. He didn't win in the end. And in the way that James tells it, there were divisions within the slave rebellion and so on. But the important thing was Toussaint Louverture was the player. He was the agent. He had power. He made decisions for himself. And then little, very, very little things, which really, to this day, I still remember. James says that the reason that we know about a lot of what Toussaint Louverture did was because he wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters. But he didn't write them. He dictated them. He dictated them to his secretaries, who were young men, mostly, in some cases, white men. Why did this matter? Because it mattered because for me, it was the first example I had in my own mind, I think, of the fact that somebody who looked like me could be in charge and could assume that they should be in charge. And they didn't have to apologize. They didn't have to explain themselves to anybody else. They didn't have to say, oh, look, how lucky am I, a Black man in charge. Toussaint Louverture was the boss. And there are all sorts of other details about, he only slept 4 hours a night, lived on, water and fruit, all of those things. And I have to confess, there was a little period in my life where I sort of tried to turn myself into Toussaint Louverture. But the important point was I discovered through that historical reading of an event that other people had analyzed and written about, but in a different way, I discovered the possibility that I could be a person in charge. So the history and the way we tell stories is incredibly important. And that brings you up to the point about that we're discussing tonight about journalism. Because in the end, what journalism is about is telling the citizen, the reader, the listener, the viewer, what's going on in the world. We tell stories and we try to bring facts into it. We try to be as objective and comprehensive as we can be in the best way. But the truth is, you know, Shingy has 1 minute 45 or 2 minutes or whatever it is. You can't put everything into that. I host discussions about the tax system or about politics. You can't get everybody into the studio and you can't get every voice, so you have to select. And therein lies the duty of the journalist to make the best selection possible, to make the most informed judgment about who should speak, what should they say, how long do they get. These things are the way in which we tell ourselves what our world is like. So this distinction between the past and history becomes incredibly important because the past has everything in it. But history and journalism is at root a business of selecting. And that's why who is there matters so much. And I want to say that there are a couple of things I want to say about this, really. The reason it's important that there are people of different backgrounds in the newsroom or making documentaries or trying to set the agenda is that with the best will in the world, if you don't have an experience, if you have never, for example, met a person of Chinese origin, how is it possible for you to understand what part that person might play in a story? That's why diversity in the teams that tell stories becomes so important, because somebody has to be able to say, actually, you're reading this wrong. And I want to give a very simple example, which Leela Hassan will remember. By the way, I said there were two Leelas. The other Leela was my eldest sister, who came in 1950 to be a nurse, and that's why my family came here. So I've always got an affection for anything to do with the health service, because I was born here after my family came. I'm the 10th of 10 children. I think I would not be here if it were not for the NHS. But the story I want to just very briefly say is that back in 1981, there was a march through London, Black People's Day of Action, organized by a group of people, but principally by Darcus Howell, who many of you will have heard of. You probably saw him in the Steve McQueen Mangrove film recently, or saw the story of him in that film. And we were reporting on this, guys, at ITV then as a reporter. And we were reporting on this, and for most part, the station, quite naturally, at that time, thought, oh, well, what is important about this? What is important about this is how will they police this demonstration? How will they keep this demonstration in order? How will they stop it turning into a riot? I don't think I need to go on about why that kind of thinking would be. I and one other person who's Black in that team said, that's not the story here. The story here is that there are 15,000 Black people on the streets of London on a demonstration. There's never been a bigger demonstration of Black people in London. This is an important political story, not a policing story. And actually, to the credit of our station, they turned it around, and that's the story that we told. But that would not have been the case had there not been people like ourselves in the room saying, no, you've got this story wrong. So it's not just a question of, telling stories about discrimination and so on, but it is basic journalism. What is the story that we're telling? What are we selecting? I want to just pick up one other point that Shingy talked about, which I think is incredibly important. Compared to when I started, as I said, when I started, there was Trevor, and that was basically pretty much it. Today, of course, there are a lot of people of colour who front programs, whether they're entertainment or whether they are reality or whether they are journalism. There are a lot of us on the telly and quite a lot of us on radio and slightly fewer in print, though for some reason, in an odd way, the print media has become, I think, less diverse in the last 10 years rather than more diverse. But wherever you go, I think that there is still quite a big issue, and that is who has authority, who calls the shots. There are very, very few people who are executives in big news organizations who are also Black. You can pick them out. For example, at Netflix, nobody knows this, but I know it because she was one of my team when I made Windrush, which you kindly mentioned. Anne Mensah is now the head of one of the big divisions at Netflix. She started in factual television, and she is now one of the most powerful TV executives. Black mixed race woman, brilliant woman, who I think will be, I mean, she's already a big noise in TV, but she's going to be an even bigger noise. So there are people there, but very, very few. In the kinds of things that I do, the big test, if you're thinking about political reporting and political interviews, is the Sunday morning show. These are the shows which, in a way, lead the news, set the agenda. Now we know on the BBC, Laura Koonsberg, before her, and Jamal. At Sky, Dermot Monahan did it for quite a while, Adam Bolton, so on. Interestingly, until I think 3-4 years ago, that seat of authority, in the 40 years I've been in television, that seat, that Sunday morning political interview show, it had been done by David Frost, Robin Day, Brian Walden, had always been done by a white man. For the first time, 4 years ago, Sky put Sophie Ridge into that seat. And then when Sophie went on maternity leave, I sat in for a year. And I think it's a striking thing that even now, if you count the number of people who have done that job on all UK television channels, there are fewer than 20, I think, people who have done that job over the 40 years I've been in TV. And of the people who have been there, almost all have been white men, the exceptions being Laura Koonsberg now, Sophie, and myself. And I think that really relates to Shami's point about, in a sense, who's still in charge. And that's a hurdle we still have to climb. We still have to get over, a mountain we still have to climb. And the last thing I want to say is that for me, I'm very, very fortunate. I've had a very, very long and fruitful career. And generally speaking, I don't have to do anything. I'm retired, but I'm very fortunate that people ask me to do things. And I'm in the very lucky position because of that I can say, I don't give a toss if you don't like me. I can say, do what I want. I think it's much tougher for younger reporters and journalists. And what I really want to say is that these people like Shingy and Claire and so on need to be supported by the community. Sometimes we or you won't like what they say and do, but I would like to say that I think it's really important that we rally around them, support them, show that we want them to climb, because in the end, that's the way that they will get into that position of decision making, and they will make things change.
Great, thanks a lot, Trevor. I think from that I got how important it is for all of us to look at who's telling the story, who's the storyteller, and then we just always need to be aware of that in our consumption of news, who's centered in the story, and how are they centered, and how that makes a big impact on how how we see things, whether that's through TV news, who writes our scripts, for our soap operas that we watch, and who's posting even on our social media channels, all of who is doing that makes a big impact on what we take in. So thank you. I'm going to move on quickly because we are running slightly behind. So I just want to now introduce Claire Anyam Osigwe to speak next. Claire is an award-winning filmmaker, a director and producer. She's also co-organiser of the British Urban Film Festival. She was commissioned by The Voice newspaper to produce and direct a short documentary, Windrush Stories, which celebrated 70 years of the first Caribbean settlers to the UK. Her film No Shades originally streamed on Amazon and is now available on Apple TV. So over to you, Claire. Thank you.
Great, thanks for staying on, everyone. I'm Dr. Claire Anyam Osigwe, and I started my career with a drama and film degree. So it was a joint BA in acting and directing. I learned very early on that I was going to basically die as a starving Black British female actress with no roles on television or film in the early 2000s. And therefore I got my PGCE in drama teaching. And I, started my second passion, which was beauty and science. So I founded a skincare brand from my kitchen in Islington called Pre-May Skincare, which went on to become the world's first allergen-friendly beauty company, garnering several awards. But I had this burning desire to come back to film and TV, but I guess I was waiting for the industry to change. I was being interviewed in 2014 on the radio, and I kept on hearing about this British Urban Film Festival. And I thought, who is brave enough to do this? The guy subsequently was tweeting me to invite me to come to the festival and potentially sponsor the festival with my luxury skincare brand. And that man now today is my husband, and I've been helping him with the festival for 8 years. His name's Emmanuel, and the festival's been going for 17 years in total. It's BAFTA accredited, BIFA accredited, African Movie Academy accredited, which is Africa's answer to the Oscars. And what we do is we celebrate and exhibit 90 or more films from Black cinema, 80% British and then 20% world cinema. And so when Trevor and Shingley talk about storytelling and our personal experiences, this is something that obviously really rings true to me. In 2018, when I closed my skincare business to finance my first feature film because I couldn't get any support from the BFI, any finances. They felt that my story was too niche. In the UK, Black romance is still niche. We are, 20 or 30 years behind the 8 ball when it comes to our African-American counterparts when they have back catalogues like Love and Basketball and Poetic Justice. These are all the films that I love to watch as a youngster. But when it comes to us showing ourselves in loving relationships, or my leads were like successful entrepreneurs, people that I went to school with and university with, is who I wanted to lead my film. It was like, we just don't know Black people that run their own businesses. We don't know, because the people with the money are often white, male, pale. So we decided to make the film ourselves. I wrote, directed, and co-starred in the film. And that made me the 6th Black female to have a movie in the cinemas. Since then, nobody has been financed, self-funded or otherwise to have a movie in the cinema, and there's been no other Black female again. And there seems to be a trend where there's almost like a 5-year gap. So hopefully somebody would come in 2023. But, it's a serious challenge, because not everybody is going to have the funds to make their own feature-length movie. I mean, I was truly an anomaly because I had no right, you know, in some people's eyes, to even create my skincare brand, much less now to, you know, jump off that mountain and start another mountain of film, arguably two of the hardest industries to navigate and succeed in, which is film and beauty. I think because of my background, I am Nigerian Igbo. My parents were immigrants. My dad died when I was 9, and then I lived and grew up in Islington Care. I think my self-resilience comes from not having sort of parents, you know, raising myself and my 2 younger sisters. I think I grew up quite quickly, and I had to. And I think that fight or flight situation kind of makes you really astute and sharp. And I think you have to sort of ask yourself really difficult questions at quite a young age, like, do I want to go and follow the crowd who are like, you know, doing drugs, dropping out of school, getting pregnant early? And I looked into the future and I just thought that just can't, it felt way too easy to do that. I like to do things that are challenging and difficult. And for me, that was becoming like really successful. This year I started, well, I'm literally just finishing my directing block on Hollyoaks. In 27 years, the show has only had one other Black female director. And there's another Black female that's just gone on now. And we had dinner together last week. And we just, you know, we text each other every day like, sis, good luck on set. Don't let them get you down, because we're both experiencing microaggressions. Our teams, you know, our crews are white male, and they do, you know, little tests on us to see how much we know, and, you know, to kind of gaslight us and to make us question ourselves, and don't afford us the same sort of respect and camaraderie that we see with our white counterparts. And that's been really eye-opening, because I thought, you know, there's been so much work going into film and TV, and it's 2022 and we're still sort of having to sort of navigate these spaces. And again, what Trevor was saying with regards to, you know, Black commissioning, and who is those commissioners who are making those decisions about, you know, script. You know, one of the things that happened on, you know, when I was in the pre-production for my block of episodes was that a Black woman in the script was actually referred to as a Karen. And I was like, whoa, wait, sorry? Did anyone fact check this? Like, a Karen, as far as I'm concerned, is a white woman that uses her privilege to endanger Black lives. Why would a mixed race girl who really identifies with her Blackness in this show ever have her boyfriend refer to her as a Karen? And they were like, oh, sorry, you know, for us, a Karen was somebody who's a busybody. And I was like, no, that's not going to work. You need to take that out. So I think, you know, having me there in that particular instance, and there were so many others, you know, kind of helps the show be more relevant, actually, and to actually deliver performances and storylines that actually reflect Britain now, and reflect world, you know, language and vernacular that some of their, you know, script departments or wider production staff just have literally, they're so disconnected from what is going on, and they have, you know, racial stereotypes about who they think we are. And even with some of the things that I've encountered on set, you know, I could kind of sense that they were like, you know, she's from North London. I'm sure soon, you know, she's probably going to like turn up to work with a knife, or she's going to start switching on people, or, you know, you just think to yourself, well, you know, you guys are in the North. What, you know, what you think of us down south in London, you know, based on what you're seeing in films, you know, crime, poverty, you know, what you're seeing on the news, you know, negative stories, Black on Black violence, or just, you know, again, racial stereotypes. It's really, really tricky. So I think there is a level of us, like Trevor said, and I really salute you, Sel, and you say that, you know, I have my own production company, Buff Studios. It's a sister arm to the festival. We use and find talent, we award them, and then we develop them so that they can create their own content, their own films, their own documentaries, and their own scripts. Some of our writers have gone on to write on massive shows like Killing Eve, which is multi-BAFTA winning. We've discovered a huge amount of talent through the festival. So when they say they can't find the talent or they don't know where the talent is, I want all of you to say now, we know where the talent is. There's over 1,000 Black British directors that have come through Buff's doors. Don't tell us where they are or where they're not. Can you now greenlight their projects so that we can see at least one Black British director in the box office on a monthly basis? That would still just be 12 a year. That's not a lot to ask. So I think that's a good place for me to sort of wrap up and invite some people to join us for the Q&A. Is that okay, Andrea?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Claire. Thank you. And I totally agree with you around the point of telling our normal stories. You know, Black people, you know, we go through trials and tribulations and, you know, have great things going on in our lives, positive and negatives, just like any other race. And, you know, those stories need to be told as well, you know, the good and the bad, just like they are in, you
just
know,
like the mediocre
other,
like day-to-day life of Black people.
Just regular life.
Yeah, just regular life. Like, yeah, nothing, no hype, no trauma, just normal everyday stuff. Yeah.
Because, you know, because we live life like other people, but that isn't portrayed in the media. You know, that's not what other people see. So thank you. So I'm now going to, as Claire said, I'm going to open the floor for questions. I know we've got some in the chat, so I'll have a quick look through. But I can see that I can see one person with their hand up actually. So I will see if I can unmute you. Cheryl FF, I can see you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Brilliant.
This has been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you to all of the speakers. As someone who is very passionate about politics and broadcasting, I'm a radio presenter. I absolutely love everything that you've all said. I just wanted to just to speak to Claire with regards to what she was saying about, you know, showing us the microaggressions and you know, showing our stories, our real life stories. So for me, I was shielded from that somewhat initially throughout my teenage years, because I was born and raised here in London, but then I moved to Guyana at the age of 11. So I had that whole sort of nearly 10 years worth of secondary school, living there, growing up there. Totally different experience. Coming back to the UK then as an adult and getting into the workplace and showing an interest in certain things, you know, obviously then that was when I sort of experienced those things. But you know, certain films that were produced by Black directors, and one person I'm thinking of, I won't name them, but in particular, you know, he got a lot of accolades for his films and they are good, but for me, they were films that, you know, sometimes we get sort of this perception that Black people, oh, well, you know, we've all got similar stories, just like what you were saying just now, you know, we don't all have similar stories. I don't know what it's like to, you know, a lot of these films seem to be the kind of, oh, growing up on an estate, living the gang life, you know, that sort of stereotype, which for me, or the Black pain, and it just, for me, it just feels so, it's not my story. You know, I grew up in a middle class West Indian Caribbean household, you know, went to church, you know, socialized, do everything that everybody else does. So, you know, it's frustrating when we see that portrayed. So it's a breath of fresh air to see, you know, people on the news and doing documentaries. I saw the Judy Love documentary very recently about the you know, Black female experience in the UK and stuff. I'd recommend that to anybody. But yeah, that was just really what I wanted to say, is that, you know, thank you for sharing your stories. It matters. And, you know, when Trevor was saying about supporting, you know, supporting each other, that is another key thing. I'm a radio presenter on a Black owned station, which, you know, there's not that many of them around. And the microaggressions that our station owner gets are just, you know, beyond the scale. People turn up at the front door and assume he's the cleaner or the handyman. You know, it's just, it's frustrating to say the least. But I just wanted to say thank you. It's been really helpful.
Oh, you're very welcome. I feel, you know, what it comes down to is, I was very fortunate last night. I was awarded by the BCA as part of their 40 by 40 Future Leaders. And one of the things I was saying is that, you know, it's really about us focusing on, you know, the antithesis of what we've been fed, focusing on freedom, focusing on unity. And on a daily basis, we can make choices, you know. We don't have to continue to finance, you know, productions that don't serve us, that don't suit us, that don't resonate with us. Even if it does come from people from our community, we can simply say, by way of not going to watch that movie or not switching it on. Do you know what I mean?
Almost selling your soul. This is something I see all the time, and I don't,
Right.
you know, I'm not criticizing it, but for me, I'm not willing to do it. I'm not willing to parody myself or my community just to say, oh, I've got that job, or yeah, I got a bit of money from it, or something like that. And sometimes I feel like I see that, and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to do this documentary about Black people. Yeah, we want someone who's going to act like this or portray this way or whatever. And it's just frustrating. So
it is. Yeah.
Sorry,
Go on, Andrea. No, go on.
We've got a few questions coming in, so I just
Go
want
on.
to
Let's keep it
read some
moving.
of them.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks a lot, Cheryl. Thank you, and Claire will stay. Shingi, I'm just going to bring you in again. So you started off the evening with us, and someone's asked, what top tips, if you've got one top tip, what would you give? What would you give to someone who's trying to get into the industry?
Okay, I think I know it is like the most cliched answer, but start something. Now more than ever, there are avenues to do that. You might be someone who's an avid TikToker, as lots of people are now. Maybe that's a way for you to break down news and curate a brand. Maybe you're someone who likes, I don't know, like Twitter or Instagram. Maybe you can go out with your phone and try and work on something. Because once you have, I guess, one, a brand, but two, content, people can kind of see what direction your work heads in, see a bit about who you are. So there's a really good example here at Sky. A young man is on a program called the Content Academy, which is an internship sort of scheme. And he's a turban wearing Sikh who wants to be the first turban wearing Sikh to present or be a news correspondent. But he's had a YouTube channel. He's still very young. He's had a YouTube channel for maybe 3 years, and he does like little short news clips, and he's gone out and he's built a brand which is him and his local community in Slough, and he does little news pieces. But by the time he interviewed with Sky, he had that YouTube channel and a whole truckload of examples of his work. Don't think it's too expensive to start now, you know, with a smartphone and just your wit and your style and your approach. And then that gives you something to show and tell, because getting from the last job to this job, for example, I obviously had a portfolio, but the first time all I had was getting onto all these programs and schemes. All I had were like my blogs, but it just showed interest and willing, I suppose. So start something. Just, you know, there are ways and there are methods to start something.
Yeah, and it's definitely easier now, isn't it? You know, just with your phone and, you know, the way you know, we can capture content. It's a lot easier now than maybe it was, you know, even just 10 years ago to do that. So yeah, hopefully that answered, I should say, your question. I'm just going through some more. There's lots of comments saying thank you to all of you. Thank you, Trevor, you are amazing, have always admired you. I
think Trevor has a hand up as well.
Oh, Trevor, sorry, I missed that. I was going through the chat. Go ahead.
I just want to say ask a question to the lady who spoke before. I just wanted to know what school she went to in Guyana, because I also grew up in Guyana, went to school, and I'm going to bet she's a Bishop's girl. But anyway, you can do that. And
I went to St Rose's, and then I went on to Queen's College for sixth form.
My goodness me, Queen's! Oh my goodness me! Sorry, everybody, we just have to deal with this, right? Queen's College.
1 minute. 1 minute.
I thought Queen's College is taking girls now. Oh my gosh!
Oh,
that was my school.
Yeah, I know it was. That's why I said it.
Oh,
I was going to see if you were going to pick up on it.
that is it's a very Guyanese thing to do. Okay, just if I could just respond very quickly on the other question about what tips and all of that. I have one suggestion: specialize. Right. Be really, really, really good and knowledgeable about something. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a sport thing, it could be science, it could be a particular area of the country. And because in journalism, the one thing that, lots of journalists are great generalists, and some people can be quite successful at being generalists. But the one person in the newsroom you can never get rid of, for example, is the person who knows about medicine. Because everybody knows at some point we're going to have to do some complicated story about, let's say, an infectious disease that's sweeping the country, and it will happen at some point, and we need to have somebody who knows how to deal with that stuff. So a very strong piece of advice about the way, if you really want to get in and be embedded and be seen as valuable, specialize. And by the way, I know this sounds ridiculous. Don't ever think that actually being on television is that interesting. Running television is interesting.
Great, thanks, Trevor.
That's the word, that's the word, running television.
Running. Okay, so I've got a question then for you. So how can we make the change to get ourselves into those positions of running, TV channels and, film? Aside from building up your own, as Claire has done, how can we, what can we do, to get ourselves in there, I suppose, I guess, knowledge of, of the industry, etc. But is there anything, that you could kind of tell us about, how you've got to where you've got, how people can get in at the top in this difficult world?
Sorry, were you asking me?
Oh yeah, anyone in the panel, but you are the most, experienced, so I will start with you.
I love the many creative ways that everybody's finding. You're really old, experienced, pioneer. I'm loving it. Nice. I think there are two things. One is play the long game. No, I know that it can be very frustrating. But people fall out, in my opinion, quite often too soon. Know that sometimes it takes a long time. That you will see other people who will seem to shoot up like meteors, but quite often they are meteors. They disappear. My view about this is you definitely have to play the long game. Secondly, the point I just made, specialize. And thirdly, and I'm not going to shy away from this, but it's important because I think it's important for us to look each other in the face and be clear. One of the things that Black people in this country do a lot that other minority groups do not do is tell everybody how rubbish the other Black people are. And that's because we've been convinced that there can only ever be one of us at the table. Just wrong, absolutely just wrong. In fact, in my book, actually, the more of us there are at the table, the stronger they are. So to be blunt, even if I didn't think Shingi Mariuki was any good, and that's not what I think he's very good, even if I didn't think he was much good, I would still talk him up in Sky, because I want him to be another person that succeeds. And, Shingi's probably too polite to say this, but I'm a company pet at Sky. People pay attention because I'm on the telly to what I say. So I go out of my way to say, look at this guy. And so it's really, really important. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't mind that because we tend to just ignore this message. Speak well of each other. speak well of each other. I can't stress that too much.
Okay, thank you. Claire, Shingi, any advice, you know, any additions to what Trevor's already told us?
No, just thanks. He's making me sound like I'm decent at this. No, I think no. In all honesty, I just think yeah, it's a really good point he makes. It's that, you know, the more of us there are in newsrooms and the more of us there are around creative top tables, if you like, the better it will be. And yeah, it's also with places like Sky or wherever there's kind of on-screen talent, you definitely kind of look up to the people who are before you. You know, so I've, you know, Clive Myrie, I read Trevor McDonald's book before I got to Sky. It's just more me just personally talking, but it's just like, you know, there are people who have made it. You kind of go, all right, you know, that's how they did it. You know, I might do it slightly differently or whatever it may be, but having role models is really useful.
Yeah, some in the comments put that Trevor McDonald, Moira Stewart, you know, all of the, you know, the people that, you know, when news on basically the faces that we would see on TV when, you know, we were younger, they were the ones that that inspire them. So really important, I think, to have those role models. And another question that's come in is, what advice would you give around creating personal resilience? I don't know if anybody wants to pick up on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to shoot in on that. I think,
lovely, thanks, Claire.
Honestly, I think the way I was able to sort of handle the sheer workload and the sort of culture shock of working in the North in Liverpool, having been born and raised in London and seeing, you know, a plethora of day-to-day diversity throughout my entire life, to then going up onto a set and, you know, walking around the local neighborhood and obviously being, you know, like, oh, there's a Black woman on set and she's not in makeup. Oh, she's the governor, she's the boss, she's calling the shot, she's the director. I think I was able to sort of stand head and shoulders with guys that are like double my age is because of the way I start my mornings. And I start my mornings with meditation, prayer. I just believe, you know, you really got to put your suit and your armor on. Like when you go out into the world, it's rough out there.
Yeah.
And I think because we're all so, you know, we consume so much on a daily basis online. It's part of our daily experience, whether we like it or not, you know, whether it's YouTube or Instagram and Twitter and then, you know, the news feed and so on forth. We absorb, you know, other people's energy and we get pulled into things that are not always necessarily our business, but obviously do have an overall effect on us as a community. And so, you know, even if I don't want to get into Harry and Meghan's, you know, situations, I might be dragged into it when I'm trying to eat my lunch and the lads are talking about, you know, in that sense, you know, it was his fault for, you know, choosing a, you know, Black woman, you know, or whatever, you know, you just overhear conversations and then you start to internalize, well, oh, if they're saying that about Meghan, what do they think about me? And you know, you just sort of have to create boundaries and pick your moments when things do, you know, when there's a time to war and battle and there's a time to say, do you know what, actually, it's got nothing to do with me right now. I need to actually focus on finishing the job. And it's that long game. Part of that long game is choosing your battles, choosing moments when, you know, it serves you to speak up and make, you know, active change. And then moments, not where you're sort of passive, but definitely where you are like, you know what, I need my strength and energy right now to fulfill this remit, you know what I mean, or to get the job done or finish this shoot on time and get it into the edit, or you know what I mean. So yeah, I'm just a big believer of self-care. I think it's very important.
Great advice. Great advice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if we fought every battle that we kind of saw on a daily basis, we wouldn't have time to do anything else.
We have nothing in the tank, yeah.
A lot of the time. Brilliant. I'm just going through the comments, the chat. Claire is a prime example of never let anyone stop you reaching for your dreams. That's a really nice positive comment there. I'm just going down a bit more. A question for Claire AO. Would you consider a program with a Black family, extended family dynamic like Desmond's, Blackish? We need more of it, as the programs never last for many series. Is that something on your list of things to do?
100%. I've got a slate of projects that I'm speaking to several streaming partners about, and one of them is sort of Black Friends meets Cold Feet. We've just never had it, you know, like 6 mates that are in relationships, you know, one's married, one relationship is they're married, the others are going through a divorce but can't quite let go, and the others are, you know, 2 sort of situationships. And I think, you know, those stories are nourishing because you can tell so much through the way people relate to each other, you know, like how people date, why people make different decisions. And family is such a massive entrenchment of being African and Caribbean, you know. Everything about us, you know, you know, from the names that we're giving at birth, if we're Ghanaian, to, you know, everybody, you know, 9 nights if you're Caribbean, when someone passes, like the food that we eat, you know, the way we eat with our hands. Say if you're like me, I'm Igbo Nigerian. So to not make products that don't celebrate and analyze and, you know, expose us and how we actually are, just feels like, you know, that's absolutely my legacy. That's exactly what I have to do. And I want to do what Ava DuVernay has done with Queen Sugar, where she has created a show with the help of Oprah, because nobody else would take it, even though she's got a deal at Netflix, where the 6 seasons in, every single episode is directed by a Black woman. Or a woman of color, because she pretty much, you know, there's like 70 apps, I think. So after 50, she kind of went through her Rolodex of the women that she wanted to give that first TV credit to. And so then invited, you know, Chinese women, Asian women, you know, non-Black, but still women of color. And now these women are going to be able to take that credit and run with it and, you know, go and do their craft. And I just think that's absolutely phenomenal. So yes, in short, we're absolutely coming with a Black family drama. Yes.
Come soon. We'll look forward to that. So this might be more for those of you, or the 2 of you working on Sky News. Is the increase we see in presenters replicated in those who work behind the scenes? Shingi or Trevor, do you want to answer that one? Oh, you're on mute. Trevor, yeah.
You probably have a better feel for it than I do, because I'm basically a tourist in television. Television's a hobby for me. But I think probably the answer is no. That's my impression. There is the one thing I will say, and I am mildly surprised by this, because it was never the case when I was in TV full time, though, that stars do have quite a lot of power. You know, for example, Lenny will do now. And stars, by the way, include, for example, people like Claire who do what Claire do, who are kind of star directors or writers, will carry a lot of weight. So, though I still think the most important thing will be the executives, the suits, the people who have the budget lines, it is also true that people who are creatively significant and who are creative assets can carry a great deal of weight in decision making. But I would say that we are still way, way light. And the truth is, I'll deny I said this if anybody. But
being recorded, remember.
But the truth is, there's still a little bit of minstrel show going on, even for people like me, we think they're great as entertainers. They're really good on screen. They're really, you know, terrific singers or talkers or whatever it is. But you wouldn't actually put them in charge of a budget, would you? There's a little bit of that still going on. And I think that's another thing that's got to be cracked.
Great, thank you. Shingi, did you want to come in or?
Yeah, off the back of what Trevor's saying, in terms of the suits, if you like, I think here there isn't that much diversity, but on screen it's changing. And his second point about stars having power, it's definitely right. You have senior colleagues, whether they are also correspondents or presenters from minority backgrounds, who do have a say. And I'll, as I kind of pave my way, I'll get to that point too, but they can talk about decisions being made about their program and other programming and issues in a way that it's not quite the same as the person who pulls the purse strings, but they do have that element of clout, which allows them to say certain things about the way things are being done. And then on a micro level, something I've done for a little while in my career, I think, since being at the Times, is that when you get on the ground and you see certain things, particularly with stories that might have racial elements that you understand, it may be the use of language, which Claire was talking about a bit earlier on, or it may be just little ideas or cultural things. When I'm there, for me, I take ownership of that. And then when I come up for my live 2A and it's 1 minute, 30 seconds, or whatever it is, I'm like, well, I understand this, so I'm going to take control. And to be honest, no one's in my ear telling me what to say editorially on the ground 9 times out of 10, unless the story is like, massively important. So for me, I've just tried to take ownership as and when I can, whether that's pitching certain stories or ideas or certain angles on stories, or just, this is my thing. I'm here, I'm on the ground. This is the way I'm approaching it. I have, a bit more of an insight into what, I don't know, they're thinking about here, where I'm from in Europe, for example.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to ask one last question to each of you. One question for each of you to answer. I guess, what advice would you give to your younger self when you were starting out, in terms of facing some of the issues that that you do in your workplaces now when it comes to race? What would you tell your younger selves? Just to finish off, there are lots more questions, but we won't be able to get to all of them, so I thought I'd just end on that one. So who wants to go first?
I'm still about 12 years old. Do I have to answer this question?
Yours should be the easiest then.
I would say something that a mentor told me once, which is that there are certain people who feel like they can, what was the word? Who have a bit less, you don't want to have no self-awareness, but have a bit less shame about putting themselves forward and asking for things and being pushy to ask for that opportunity and that moment to do something. If I did that a few more times to second guess myself a little less, whether it's on a pitch or a certain story or an idea, maybe certain things would have got off the ground earlier, or, I would have, I'm still really happy with how my career is going, and Sky are good at being like, giving me chances. But I think just be a little more pushy is what I would tell myself. Sometimes I'm a bit too lax. I'm like, why should it be me? Whereas other people are like, why shouldn't it be me? I need to be more that. I'm probably talking to myself in the present too.
Great, thank you. So Trevor?
Probably 2 pieces of advice I'd give myself. Listen more, talk less. And also, oh, sorry, I might be muted. Yeah. My first piece of advice to myself would be listen more and talk less. And secondly, look around you and realize the other guys aren't that good. They're not that good. And I think somebody was saying earlier on, echoed something that this is not my line. It's a very good line from Diane Abbott. Something she and I, we're kind of like brother and sister. We never agree about anything, but I'm very fond of her. But one thing she did say that I always remember, which is true equality is when our mediocrities are as successful as everybody else's mediocrities. And I think sometimes we just need to remember that the other guys are not that, I mean, some are, like any group of people, there'll be brilliant ones, but they're not all brilliant. And we're not all bad.
Yes.
Will you forgive me? I've been displaying presenter power already because I've kept one of my teams waiting for half an hour. This has been really fun to do. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Trevor.
Take care, Trevor.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Mhm.
Oh man, it's a shame my
Okay.
question won't get asked.
Oh, sorry. Claire,
Yes.
I'm not sure if you heard the question. We'll just
What would I tell
end
my
on-
younger self?
Yeah.
I would probably say to not have a plan B. It's really weird because obviously if I didn't have a plan B, my plan A wouldn't have happened. But I think it would have happened now when I look back on it, if I had just like thrown all my energy and weight behind it. I think it was destined to happen, but I couldn't see it at the time because I was just focused on like, you know, the day-to-day grind of like living as a young 20-something in the city, trying to make ends meet, being independent. I wasn't thinking about truly like what my real desires are, what my calling is. I think that's these are sort of questions that you ask yourself into your like 30s. And now looking back, like all I ever wanted to do was direct and write. And that's all I'm doing now. But it took me to like, you know, join a rap group, do some acting, like just do loads of different things.
Yeah. So you have to do that sometimes to find your calling.
Travel the world. Yeah, do you know what I mean? To like actually come back full circle to my legit joy that I would do for free, but I won't. Do you know what I mean? Because I just love it. Like that is all I'm here to do. So I think just stick to your guns and just cut off distractions. And sometimes you are that distraction because of your lack of self-belief. So you need to really understand what are your blocks. Like, why don't you rate yourself? What is holding you back? You know, how do you make your yeses stronger than your no's to yourself? And it is what Shingi was saying. There's so many ways now to build your portfolio to be, you know, to sort of follow your dreams that are at your disposal now that weren't there, you know, 10, 20, 15 years ago. So how many, you know, how much more excuses can we make to not support each other, to not start that blog, to not, you know, start that business, maybe don't even register it yet, you know, do a test bed at a local market. That's how I started my skincare brand. I went to Spitalfields, I paid for my stall every day, every Sunday for a year. And I just tested the market, you know, for a year. I'm just saying, you know, I would do that.
It's taking those chances, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, take the chance on yourself.
What we face a lot of the time. Yeah, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I'm gonna have to shoot as well.
We're gonna have to shoot off as well.
So do I. Need to catch a train. But I'm so grateful, and just, you know, get our details from Andrea. I'm happy for people to have my email. I'm also Claire Anyam O on Instagram and, you know, Twitter. So follow me. I'm not bougie. I follow people back. I've got absolutely no ego. Stay in touch, man.
Take care, man.
Thank you. Share your details.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm just going to bring in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
I'm just going to bring our medical director, Shub Banerjee, in just to end the evening. He's our exec director of the Race Equality Network as well. So thanks, Shub.
Thank you, Andrea. A little bit of a shame because I did want to thank Claire, Trevor, and Shingi for some very, very insightful and honest stories and thoughts, which is useful to share, but actually applies to all of us, doesn't it, in many ways. I guess from a Croydon perspective, we know our population. Croydon is very diverse racially, and we have a lot of Black people, and that's reflected in our patients, it's reflected in our staff, and that's something that we need to treasure, build on. And, you know, we were talking about people in power calling the shots. Well, I can tell you that the last medical director whose shoes I'm still trying to fill, was a Black lady, and an extremely inspiring one at that. So thank you to all of you for making the time today. And thanks to our speakers, some very interesting and rich discussion, and not a job that's complete by any means. But the world today is a different world to that which most of us grew up in. I mean, we look at the current shenanigans, for want of a better word, in politics. We had a white male stand down, a white lady and an Asian man fighting for prime ministership, a Black gentleman as chancellor, and no one has been successful. But still, very interesting to see the diversity in politics, and that's really top of the tree. So that's something to be treasured, encouraged, and I hope we keep doing this in Croydon, keep raising awareness, and do it with some openness, honesty, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to take on these difficult conversations, because they can be difficult, particularly in a mixed environment. So thanks very much, Andrea and Layla, for sorting, and it's been a very interesting evening. Thanks to everyone.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you, Stuart.
With that, we'll say good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Okay, good night, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Good night, everyone.
Bye. 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 Bye.